Deep in the river valleys of Pennsylvania stand towering rusted monuments to an industrial empire that once defined the modern world. These are the decaying ruins of the state's steel mills, slowly being reclaimed by the earth. For over a century, these valleys were defined by the heat of the mills. The facilities operated around the clock, casting a persistent orange glow over the riverbanks as they powered a period of global economic growth. As seen in this photograph of workers riveting steel high above the street, these mills forged the massive structural beams that enabled the American skyscraper boom. The reach of Pennsylvania steel extended into the nation's infrastructure. Here, we see a worker walking the pier as the massive steel structure of the Golden Gate Bridge takes shape over the water. These same mills produced the armor and plating for wartime naval fleets. By the middle of the 20th century, Pennsylvania was manufacturing more steel than all the Axis powers combined. This output established the region as the primary center of the world's industrial manufacturing capacity. Then, the production lines stopped. The flowing liquid metal hardened into cracked amber rust as the blast furnaces went cold. Massive workforces were laid off, leaving miles of hollow, decaying shells stretched along the riverbanks. How did a global industry collapse so rapidly? And what secrets remain inside these silent buildings, left exactly as they were when the workers walked away? To understand the end of this industrial era, we must step inside these rusting giants and trace the timeline of their decline. Our journey begins at the Homestead Works. Today, its entrance gates sit deserted, and the railroad tracks that once carried molten iron are entirely overgrown with wild vines. This portrait shows Andrew Carnegie, the industrialist who constructed these colossal mill complexes to consolidate his control over the steel market. But the operation faced internal friction from the start. In this 1892 photograph, striking workers sit on a hillside, keeping watch over the mills in the valley below during a violent clash with Carnegie's company over wages and labor rights. Generation after generation of immigrant families worked 12-hour shifts in these mills, laboring in extreme heat to meet the world's demand for iron. This history of labor disputes established a cycle of distrust between workers and management that would persist for the next century of mill operations. Further down the Monongahela Valley, the ruins at sites like McKeesport reveal flooded basement pits and shattered skylights. By the 1970s, the industry was struggling. Domestic owners had failed to modernize their aging equipment, while cheap imported steel began flooding the American market. As seen in this photograph of a speaker standing before the emblem of the United Steelworkers of America, the unions remained a powerful force, often locked in a standoff with mill owners. As this quote from a union vice president highlights, decades of tension meant that many workers didn't believe the warnings of economic trouble. To the average worker, the companies were simply crying wolf. The situation reached a breaking point on Black Monday in September 1977, when thousands of workers were laid off in a single afternoon. These layoffs marked the end of large-scale manufacturing in these valleys, leaving local towns to struggle with a rapidly vanishing tax base. Inside the machine halls of Bethlehem Steel, massive overhead gantry cranes now sit stranded, frozen high on rusted runway beams. The preservation inside is eerie. Control rooms still feature analog gauges and abandoned paper logbooks, while in the locker rooms, dusty work boots and safety gloves remain exactly where they were taken off decades ago. Now, nature is accelerating the structural decay. Thick green vines and sapling roots burst through the concrete floors, wrapping tightly around the rusted steel framing. The silence inside these giant halls today stands in contrast to the energy of their past, as the environment slowly reclaims the physical remains of the industry. The shutdowns triggered widespread economic hardship, causing young families to move away in search of new opportunities elsewhere in the country. This raises a question. If these mills have been dead for decades, why do dozens of abandoned sites still sit untouched along the river corridors? As this diagram shows, demolition is extraordinarily expensive. There are three primary costs: the heavy structural steel framing, the hazardous asbestos insulation in the walls, and a deep layer of contaminated soil beneath the foundation. Because these complexes are too expensive to dismantle and too toxic to clear, many continue to stand as silent witnesses to a vanished era. Yet some of these sites have been creatively repurposed. At Mill 19 in Pittsburgh, the original steel skeleton now houses advanced robotics research centers and solar power generation farms. And as seen in this view of the blast furnaces at Bethlehem, the structures have been preserved as a cultural park and concert venue. These rusting giants stand as monuments to the workers whose labor built modern America. They serve as a reminder of how global economic shifts can change a landscape across generations. If you want to explore more history with us, hit that subscribe button. Leave a comment below. Did anyone in your family work in the steel industry? Keep looking for the stories hidden behind our forgotten past.